Your movie, my movie, their movie, our movie. Your movie, my movie, their movie, our movie. Your movie, my movie, their movie, our movie. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Your Movie, My Movie with Dan and Steve.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Steve. And this is episode 0 of our little venture in film reviews and criticism. So we thought that we would record this episode 0 to kind of introduce ourselves, talk about where we're from, how we got into film, and what we expect of this podcast, because we haven't really talked about that yet.
We haven't.
No, we haven't.
We're figuring it out right now. In other words.
Yeah. This wasn't well planned, but it doesn't have to be fun and interesting. All right. So, Dan.
Yes.
Let's start with you.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I was born in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Lived there till I was like 3 or 4, and then I moved to Texas with my parents. And we lived in Lindale, Texas, which is a small town 2 hours east of Dallas, right next to Tyler, the rose capital of the world. Fun fact, Lindale is the home of country singer Miranda Lambert. And so every time you would go into Lindale, you would see the billboard with this like really 2000s picture of Miranda Lambert with like the jeans that like they're really waist jeans and like rhinestone pockets.
Mm-hmm.
It's very fun.
The mom jeans with the big hips.
Yes.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
the sparkly butt pockets.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a Miranda Lambert store in the town square. It's called the Pink Pistol. Yeah, it's owned by her family, I think.
Well, I mean, I guess they gotta make money somehow.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Miranda Lambert. I don't think I've heard a single song of hers. But yeah, so anyways, I lived in Texas, grew up there. I was homeschooled. And then I moved to Florida in 2014-15 area, came to West Palm Beach, and went to public school for my junior and senior years, and then went to film school at a community college with Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so I got into film. Is that the next question?
Well, let me talk about where I'm from.
Okay, you talk about where you're from.
Yeah, I'm from right here.
Nice. Which is?
Well, it's West Palm. It's Palm Beach County, technically. But I grew up and was raised in the Everglades, that area, out in the swamp. I am a second generation Floridian. I would be third, but my grandfather's from Georgia. And he came down here.
Same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. My grandfather came down, his family came down to Florida during the 1920s, and his father died in the hurricane that killed 5,000 out in the Everglades.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of a big deal in that local area. And so, he had a rough life, and he served in the Navy during World War II, where he dropped off the soldiers on the beaches during D-Day.
Oh, wow.
And then, he had, my father, my uncle, my aunt, and, he was a sugarcane farmer. My dad was a sugarcane farmer. And they tried to get me to be a sugarcane farmer, which has not worked out
Right.
for any of us.
What do farmers like growing up? Like, what do they like? Do they like shooting stuff and like hunting and stuff?
I wouldn't know because I'm not a natural farmer. Like, I hated it. I mean, I guess this will go, we'll go ahead and segue because like, I was a dork when I was a geek, as a kid. Like, I was into sci-fi. I was into superhero cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was always into cartoons. And my dad, he was so cheap that instead of spending the money to take his family of 5 to the movie theaters, he would just, get HBO every month. So that's one of the ways that I got into film myself. was just watching HBO at home. Because I was a geek, I didn't have any friends growing up. I was into football.
Mm-hmm.
It was so funny. It was so funny because it was my senior year at high school, and it was a private school, but it was also like very Christian affiliated.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to be in PE up until the ninth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and then the coach was like, he did a test for like football questions that he asked everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and like I got a C. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where everybody is supposed to know football already,
right?
That you don't need to explain it to anyone.
Yeah.
And my dad, he was a workaholic, so he never explained it to me. And people are like, "Well, how did you never get into football?" And I'm like, "Well, nobody told me."
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I pursued my own interests, which were, reading. I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. And I really like fantasy and science fiction stuff, and comic books, and I would watch cartoons. I love cartoons, especially superhero cartoons. And then my dad, he was a bit of a geek, because he found like these old Marvel comics from the late 60s.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of them.
He found them?
He had bought them when he was younger.
Okay, yeah.
And like they were put in like an attic somewhere. And so they were in this big box, and like it was all eaten up by rats and stuff.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop me from reading them.
Yeah, I have a box like that under my bed.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my dad has some like Bronze Age comics or something.
Right. And like one of them was Giant Size X-Men #1. Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that is, but number ones are big deals usually.
It was the first issue with the second team, basically. Okay. It was the one where Wolverine joined, and Storm and Colossus instead of the original 5. But he did also have the original run of the Phoenix Saga for X-Men. Wow. But anyway, let's not get into comic books. Okay,
I would be completely lost.
So yeah, I would just watch movies all day. And then I went to college, and that's where I met one of my best friends. I'm still friends with him to this day. We were roommates, and we just happened to, get together in the same dorm. And he really wanted to go into film. And I watched so many HBO movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really into film. Maybe what I could do is just focus on screenwriting, and instead of writing like books and novels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's how I started. And yeah, in the 20 years since, I've been I didn't grow up being able to read the things I wanted to read, because I started working when I was 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have that free time to like really get my influences. So I spent my 20s and 30s doing that. And then I decided to finally, my dad's set to retire, and like, I don't want to inherit the farm. So now I went to film school, and, trying to get into the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm at now.
What did you do? Like, because I know you said you used to listen to a lot of like podcasts or like books on recorded books.
Yeah, I would listen to those on the farm, because a lot of farming is driving a tractor.
Did you listen to those growing up though?
No.
Yeah, okay.
They didn't have podcasts when I was growing up.
They had like Walkmans.
No, they didn't have those. So I mean, like, they did have those on like CDs and cassettes, but those were way too expensive.
True. Yeah.
So it wasn't until Apple came out, and that was around 2008, which is when the Great Recession happened. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I need to find out what's going on. I need to just stop being in my own little world, and get a little bit more educated. And so I did that through podcasts. So I listened to a lot of history podcasts, a lot of financial podcasts at that time, some comedy podcasts, because I would listen to 8 hours of podcasts in a day.
That's crazy.
Yes. Yes. But this was like way back when.
Right.
And, since I've, started school, I haven't really listened to a whole lot of podcasts since then. But I also know that it's kind of funny because before podcasts were flooded by comedians, doing their stuff, trying to promote their, when they go on tour for stand up, that was kind of the big scene back then. And now it's like true crime and like news magazines and stuff. So
I didn't listen to many podcasts at all. Like I listened to one consistently and I just started listening to another, but that was a comedy podcast, Dynamic Banter. And that's like, yeah, they're comedians. So that's interesting though, because that was my impression of podcasts was comedians, but I've also listened to like another film podcast. I like those as well. But I haven't listened to any history or anything like that. Sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, did you get into film?
So I grew up pretty much always watching films. We had the Netflix DVD subscription. Like my mom is a big person who's like into movies and stuff. She's also like a really good writer. She taught me how to write because I was homeschooled. So like every lunch break I had was like half an hour to an hour, and we would always watch like Columbo like every day, or like the Rockford Files, or just movies. So I liked movies all the time.
You do love Columbo.
I love Columbo. That's something you should know.
Yes.
But I had a friend growing up, Noah, and she and I got together she's a few years younger than me, but basically we started hanging out and started making dumb like videos in the backyard of like firecrackers blowing things up and things like that. And Noah would edit them together. And so we started then doing little stupid sketches where we would beat each other up, and basically we'd just do a bunch of dumb YouTube videos. And we did that for basically as long as we hung out until I moved. But the summer before I moved, we made like a half-hour long movie about two characters, one who was moving away. So it was like a very like meta, goofy type thing. But yeah, we started liking movies around the same time. Noah got me into Inception, which was like a big eye opener for me. I was like, wow, this is what movies can be, and like now, Inception isn't my favorite movie. I don't even think it was back then, but I just really liked it. Yeah. So Inception, and then making YouTube videos. And I continued to make YouTube videos when I moved to Florida. I moved to Hobe Sound originally, which was like an old people community. It's a 55 over plus. We were renting a trailer. So it was just me and my parents. And then I had soccer practice, which was like with people my age, but that was like maybe twice a week. So all the other time was just me in my room, like trying to stay sane and like make dumb YouTube videos. So yeah, I've been making YouTube videos for a while. And then we moved to West Palm and I continued to do that. And when I got into high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do already. So I joined the drama club and I started acting. And yeah, I became the president of the drama club my senior year. That's cool. And so I still act in short films for the college and things like that. But yeah.
So I'm more of a genre movie guy. And the reason why is because I grew up in the 80s and the cartoons I watched were toy commercials. Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Silverhawks, GoBots, on and on and on. And I also watch HBO a lot. And this was HBO before the 2000s. This was HBO before they did Sopranos. This was HBO back when it's kind of funny. HBO back then was a lot like how Netflix and Hulu were when they first started. Okay. When they just licensed anything at all just to fill out their library, no matter how good it was. And so I grew up watching a lot of those genre movies that they could, license very cheaply. So what were
some formative ones?
What's that?
What were some formative ones of those?
Well, Beastmaster, definitely. Okay. There is a joke where HBO used to be called "Hey, Beastmaster's on." so that kind of movie. There's another movie, Hiding Out, which I hope to review, with John Cryer, and I believe his name is Keith Coogan.
We should also, I think we should address the age gap.
Yes. Well, okay, we can do that too.
Because I have like vaguely an idea of what you're talking about, but
yeah, I know you have no idea what I'm talking about.
A lot of the references you're gonna say, I'm not gonna get.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm in my early 40s, and you're in your early 20s.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be a wild ride of references. But yeah, Hiding Out was one.
What is Hiding Out about? Or
yeah, I'll tell you. John Cryer plays like this accountant. Oh, it's great. It's so great. John Cryer plays an accountant who he was a mob accountant but didn't know it.
A mob accountant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was an accountant for a mobster. And then he was put into protective custody so that he could, testify against him.
Okay.
But then the mobster like murdered the FBI agents, protecting him. So what he does is he shaves his beard, cuts his hair, dyes it so like he has like golden hair like on the sides. And then he trades like a pack of cigarettes for like a hobo's like felt overcoat.
Okay.
And he's wearing sneakers and like a waistcoat. And so like he looks like the hippest teenager ever. And he hides out in a high school.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then he takes one of the girls out for a date.
Oh no, gosh.
Yeah, we'll watch it.
Okay.
We'll watch it. All right. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. They don't hook up until college, okay?
Wait, he does it until college? Like that's how long he's in this long con for?
You just have to watch.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll watch it.
Okay.
So that's one movie. There's another movie. I didn't watch it. I just saw like things about it. But I saw that it's on Amazon Prime. But
we're talking about early HBO things.
Yes. It's like this weird fantasy movie where there's a sword, but it has like 3 blades, and like the guy can like shoot them.
Because the only thing cooler than swords is gun swords.
Yeah, well, it's not a gun sword because a gun sword would shoot a bullet. You know what I mean? It doesn't shoot a bullet.
Yeah, it's a philosophical gun sword.
Okay. There's that. I don't know if we'll get to that one. that might be too painful for us. Another one So yeah. Those kind of bad movies kind of really influenced me. Well, I won't say bad movies. I mean, some of them were bad. Cherry 2000 with Melanie Griffith. That's on Amazon, but we won't watch that. Well, we might watch that. Anyway, so basically what I was getting at is like, I'm more of a genre movie guy. But you seem to be more into indie movies and art films.
Yeah. So I guess the way that happened is, well, I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a very I grew up Christian, and I grew up on a missionary campus. When I lived in Texas, that's where we lived. We lived next to a missionary campus, and part of the time on the missionary campus. And so like, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of movies that other people were allowed to watch. There was, no horror, basically, no raunchy comedies. There was a lot of restrictions, I guess. So I was allowed to watch certain things, and I guess maybe that shaped some of my tastes. But when we moved, we would always, I guess even my whole life, we would get things out from the library, and we would watch those movies. So, and I guess I'm kind of wandering around, but I grew up watching like Westerns and anything from the past, because the past was a lot safer. There was more like, they were stricter with what they showed and things like that. So my parents were more willing to let me watch things from the past. So like John Wayne is what I grew up on, like Magnificent Seven, me and you talk about all the time. But then moving to Florida, they have a great library system here, like a lot of like indie movies actually. And so my mom would always just like get a bunch of random movies out that looked interesting. So we would watch those. And then that's kind of when I started really getting interested in that, in art films, indie films, low budget films, because I also knew that I wanted to make films. So anything low budget, I was immediately interested in, because I was thinking of, how would I do this? Would I be able to do something like this? And I think that's also a way that I was interested in indie films. But yes, indie films are more of what I'm interested in. I don't exactly know why, just because I guess they hold my interest more. I'm interested in film as an art form, in film as an exploration of humanity, and yeah, sort of philosophical ideas too. That growing up studying the Bible intensely, you learn about a lot of these like theological philosophies that I still think about and are interesting, and are things that you kind of try and pick apart. But I think that's also just my personality, is I like to question, and I'm curious. So movies that have the answers right away are not always interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like movies that are there to have a good time, and like, action movies, or, some superhero movies and things like that.
Right.
I will say that, at college is when I started watching movies that I previously wasn't allowed to watch, and having a lot of fun with basically just watching whatever I wanted to watch, which is very freeing and great. And this is a kind of an exercise in that too, this podcast. We have very different perspectives, but
yes,
we're both,
and that's okay.
We're both still white men, so it's not that different.
Yes. Yes. Let's get into like how this podcast started.
Okay.
So the reason why this podcast started is basically because I need to do something. I've graduated from film, and let's just say I'm not getting on sets. I'm not getting on sets. So I have to do something. I have to look out for myself. And that's what I'm doing. So I decided to make a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Not this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mentioned that to you, that I was going to do this podcast.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, I'd be happy to help out.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
But you're
I was like, that needs to be something that I do myself.
Yeah. You don't have to depend on anyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't want to be that blunt or negative about that. But that's basically the reason why. And I said, well, you told me that I had kind of a podcaster energy about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I always did want to do a movie review podcast. But the thing is that I would need somebody to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And then you volunteered to do it.
Yes.
And then it's funny because you're the one that came up with the restriction for the podcast.
Which is funny because in film school, Stephen would be all about restrictions, and I would be very against any form of self-restriction. But here I am.
Yeah.
Anyways, what about that? Why is that funny?
Well, you say what the restriction is.
Oh, that Stephen picks a genre movie that.
Well, no, that's the format. Our format is that because this is called Your Movie, My Movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it is we'll go back and forth where I'll pick a movie for us to watch and talk about, and then Dan will pick a movie to watch and talk about. And, since we have our different tastes, I'll lean more towards the genre movies, and he'll probably lean more towards the Indian art films, although that's not, set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
But the restriction you did about the kind of movies that we won't talk about.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
The kind of movies we don't want to talk about are the franchise movies, the movies that are being resurrected daily, like the Harry Potters, the Star Wars, the give me some other ones, like
you said
RoboCop, Terminator, Alien.
Yeah, you specifically said, I don't want to review RoboCop or Alien. So
I need to watch RoboCop. I still haven't seen RoboCop, but I love Alien. All these movies they can be great, but everyone talks about them.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be another podcast that talked about movies that everyone else is talking about, because when I look for a podcast, I look for things that can help me find new things to love, not things that I already love.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I agree with that, because there's this one podcast that came out called James Bonding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all they talk about is James Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. And that's kind of how like I really got into James Bond movies was from that podcast. So yeah, I think that's a great idea for sure.
I mean, it can be cool, but like if everyone's talking about the same one, then it's like, yeah, to me, it's not as interesting.
Yeah. We probably won't say anything that hasn't already been said before.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. So yeah, so that's what you can expect from the show. You know, not RoboCop and not Aliens.
Yes. There could be RoboCops and Aliens in these movies, but they won't be those franchise.
Okay.
I want to do, as much like obscure stuff as possible. Obscure, interesting things.
Right.
So if they're interesting, if they're good, it's up to you. It's not that very much a restriction. I'm just not going to pick Alien. I'm not going to pick
Okay.
movies that everyone has seen or everyone is always like circle jerking about. Like, oh my gosh, we're not going to watch Citizen Kane.
Right.
We're not going to watch Quentin Tarantino movies. Okay. I mean, we can. You can pick them. I'm not going to pick them.
We'll watch movies produced by Quentin Tarantino, if anything.
Okay. I don't know what he's produced, actually.
He's produced like a couple of martial arts films and like other films like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just to get them off the ground and get them funding.
That's cool.
So.
But you know what I mean, right?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Okay.
I know what you mean.
All right.
And I agree.
Cool.
Okay. So is there anything else we need to talk about?
Do we want to talk about influences? Or, I mean, I don't know. What we also are interested in making movies, right? Or writing them.
Yeah.
We're both interested in being directors or producers or anything in the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
So what interests you most about making these things? You said that you like to
movies?
write. Yeah.
I really want to write TV.
Mm-hmm.
In television, it's the writer that gets the power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not directors. For those who don't know, in film, it's the director that has the most power. The director is hired by the producer to do his creative vision, which means the director can make all kind of changes to the script that he wants to. Which sometimes is for the best and sometimes it's not. Either way, the writer who is in control of the story doesn't have much input. It's not that way with television. With television, it's the writer that controls the production. Because you have to maintain those stories for all of those episodes. You have to make all those decisions for all those episodes. And in television, you're not just a writer, you're also a producer, because you also have to think about things like, you know, budgets. So you have to think about, well, you know, what kind of show is this going to be? Is this going to be a show that's set in one setting where you only need that stage and nothing else? Or is this going to be like, is this going to be a show where people travel and go on adventures and then you have to go to different locations? You know, and that's going to affect the budget. And, you know, so all of those kind of producing questions, I take in consideration when I write, because I want to be a hack writer. I really want to be a hack writer. I just want to be a guy who writes on demand, because like those are some of my literary influences because I'm interested in like I'm not just interested in history. I'm also interested in the history of media. I wanted to kind of maybe do a history about comic books. So I kind of studied this for a while, like where comic books came from. And they came from the pulp novels of the 30s and 20s. And then before that, the adventure novels.
Okay, so like John Carter of Mars type thing?
Yeah. John Carter of Mars, Doc Savage, the Lensman series by E.E. Doc Smith.
Okay.
The Shadow, which was also a radio program produced by Orson Welles. The Green Hornet. Even it goes further back to the Zorro. He's also a proto superhero. And it goes back further than that to the Scarlet Pimpernel, which was a play about a French aristocrat during the French Revolution who would like rescue aristocrats from the Reign of Terror.
So a vigilante aristocrat.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then it goes further back than that to King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider something or other. Yeah, he also wrote She, which was a sequel. And so like I know all about that stuff. And that's the kind of stuff I love. People just, churning out page after page after page, just, of these formulaic stories as entertainment. So, those are my biggest influences.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm more into entertainment than art. Whereas you are into art.
Yeah, very much. That's funny. I think that's where our differences are interesting and probably complementary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess I am very much more into like, questions. So like films that question the human experience. I think I just said this earlier, but yeah, I guess I started really picking up influences. I mean, it started out Christopher Nolan, had interesting, ideas in his films, and then it progressed to Richard Linklater, Andrei Tarkovsky, many others, but those are the main ones. I mean, not main ones. I don't know how to say it, I guess. People who are, not Hollywood, not mainstream exactly. They're sort of mainstream, non-mainstream, I guess, but still. Yeah, and they're very much focused towards art. But I mean, it's hard to describe what art is. But they're less concerned with conventions and structures and expectations. Or if they are concerned with expectations, they're concerned with subverting them. So, yeah. I don't know.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that you don't know the definition of art. You're not sure of one.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently watched this YouTuber, and she was talking about, she wanted to explain what Scorsese really meant about how Marvel movies aren't cinema.
Right.
And like she gave a great definition, and she basically said that art is transformational, while entertainment is maintenance.
Sorry. Okay. Well, you just said art is transformational. One of the things
Let's go raw.
One of the things I love about movies is that they change the way I see the world. Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest influences on me was a movie called Before I Disappear. I'm gonna make you watch it probably.
Okay.
But that was a movie that like changed the way I saw things, and that's what I love about film, is it changes perspective. And so I think that's a great definition. Yeah, I mean, I think that is what I'm interested in about movies. So, yeah, that's a great definition.
Right. And, I agree, because, being a fan of, watching all those genre movies, but also being like into science fiction and fantasy and even comic books. One of the things that really drew me to those is the tropes that they use. Because they all share tropes.
Patterns.
And so, what to expect from a genre piece. And, that also really drew me.
That gives you a certain peace of mind going into it, even.
Yeah, you know what to expect. But also as a writer, you can play with things, you know. Like you said, even in a genre piece, you can subvert things to make it different.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's maintenance. Mm-hmm. When you want, when you feel like, watching something that's science fiction, just go to a genre science fiction movie. And also, like one of the points that she also made was that, those art films, they only get made during boom economic cycles.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because during like recessions and depressions, people want to feel good and they don't want to take chances on something. So they want the familiarity of recurring characters.
Is this, though, are we speaking of mainstream art films? Or
Well,
art films
the
in
kind of
general?
movies that studios will make.
Yeah. Okay.
Although
So
that's kind of different now
it is different now, but
because of studio stuff.
I feel like it is still very similar, though. I think it hasn't changed as much as we think it has.
No.
But yeah.
Well, the great thing about, art films and indie films now, though, in regards to filmmaking, is that it's so accessible.
Yeah.
All you need is a DSLR. You don't even need a DSLR anymore. You just need a smartphone with a camera.
Yeah.
And then, it would help if you could learn how to use it, how to do filmmaking, through YouTube tutorials. But you don't even need to do that, really.
Yeah, you really don't. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, again, growing up, me and my friend would just make stuff on her desktop Mac computer. We would just record from the little tiny monitor on the computer and make things out of that. I mean, they were terrible, but you could still do it.
Yeah.
But I guess, I mean, I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, in that these art films are only made during a boom.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's maybe the studio ones, but I think that art flourishes in adversity. So, like, at least I think in times of difficult economic times, there are these art films that kind of go under the radar that are not studio Hollywood necessarily, but they are films, and they are being made during those times. And those are some of my favorites, I think.
No, that's very fair. That's a very fair point. Because, our film theory teacher, I took both of his history classes, and one of the things that he talked about was like during the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
where, that was a boom time for the US. And we got movies like Rambo and, Terminator and, all the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. But then he also mentioned like the underground art movement that was happening. And, there's also the punk movement that happened, which he was a part of.
Which I'm a huge fan of the punk movement. That's another, I guess, formative opinion or thing I care about.
Yeah. So.
And his name, Roger Rawlings was our professor, and we'll probably talk about him in the future.
Okay.
I mean, he's quite a character, but
yes, he is. Yeah. So.
I mean, we covered a lot. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we done for this episode?
I think so.
All right, everybody. Well, that was episode 0 of our new little podcast here. And I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.